Sorry for the dramatic intro, John, but
there we go.
All right, so a little backstory here. Kale typically doesn't do the show with me. Typically, I have another co-host who does it with me. We do it a little later in the evening. He's working today. So I happened to come upon your clip speaking with Brett Weinstein, or Weinstein, I'm not sure. But Weinstein, speaking about faith and how atheism has failed our civilization. And Kale and I have done shows where we actually discuss what's kind of going on in the cultural zeitgeist, you know. So we've discussed Jordan Peterson and Alex O'Connor together when they did their show. We usually that whole arena we like to discuss together, because Kale and I are very interested in the meaning crisis that young men are facing right now. Both have teenagers who are going into college right now, or like, you know, we're constantly discussing what we could give to our kids. It's a little bit different, especially our daughters we're a little worried about. But in that clip where you were speaking to Brett, you had mentioned, which I wasn't even aware of because I've seen clips of you around and about, but you had gotten into a little bit about why you had returned to your Catholic faith. And unbelievably, you responded when we reached out to you. And I'm like,
why is it unbelievable?
You know what it is? Sometimes I'm shocked. I mean, listen, I've had Mel Gibson on.
Yeah.
But it's just I got Tom Holland on. It's always random who says sure, no problem, and then some people aren't open to it. But I'm sure that now that you put that clip out, that a lot of people are going to want to reach out for you from this Catholic world.
Well, I am honored by that, and I am undeserving of it. So I will try my best, because as I think I said in our little exchange, like, if you're going to grill me on catechism, oh boy, am I going to disappoint.
No, I'll tell you. Oh, go ahead, Kev.
I was just going to say, I mean, I'm someone who's listened to a ton of Brett and Heather. I've listened to a ton of some of these folks that you sort of talk about from the intellectual dark web and all of that. And so I found it just such an amazing moment. You were it was like this sort of fit of honesty that you just sort of like kind of erupt. It's like, well, I just got to lay this out. I got to tell you, like, I'm kind of leaning in, and, to me, that just made a lot of sense. And I thought it was real and genuine. So, I mean, this is not a grill session, I assure you.
No.
It'd be fine too. I'm just saying I would fail. It is, not only is it genuine, but that interview took place or much earlier in the year.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even, there's whole things I left out in that part that frankly, I feel more comfortable, although still not fully talking about, that I didn't talk about in that. And it was partly to, just about the actual fundamental truth claims of Catholicism, about the resurrection of Christ, about, the Eucharist, these things that, they're kind of weird to believe in.
They're totally weird.
Like,
of course. Yeah.
So you believe in that? The body of Christ?
Yeah.
The wafer? Like, and I think all faith, if you're exercising your reason and your free will, has a tension.
Yeah.
Right. And that's certainly true. I don't have especially good blind faith. I have a choice.
Yeah.
Part of this. It's a very big one. And that was the part I think of what I was trying to get at, is that there's all these things that I see that all seem to align with, I think this is the truth, but then I still choose.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you saw when, Ayaan Hirsi Ali sort of came out as a Christian, about a half year ago. She's on stage, right, with sort of some of her former, new atheist friends. And she sort of says, well, I choose to believe. And I know the way that sounds to maybe people who are sort of hardcore and secure in their faith. I know the way that sounds for someone who is sort of outside of the faith and is sort of just not convinced, but I think, if we're being honest with ourselves, we recognize that it is an ascent to, sort of an act of humility in a very real way, an act of submission in a very real way. Because I think for most of us who grow up, in the world that the three of us grew up in, the plausibility of the thing seems to fall outside of what is acceptable. And even for those of us who do make an ascent, we recognize that, and this is not my point, this is a point that Charles Taylor makes in A Secular Age, is that even for the believer in a secular age, we recognize that there are options out there, and that belief is always resting on top of a option, a choice. So it makes it difficult.
I think,
John, what I'd
go
like
ahead.
to actually do is, I want you to, because you had mentioned that you didn't you didn't put your son through getting his confirmation, and I don't want to do like the whole show on your conversion story, but I do kind of want to give people a little snapshot of what it was that kind of clicked into place that made you even start going down this road.
Where to start? Well, let's see. So I am a cradle Catholic, 100% Italian, South Philadelphia. Went to 12 years of Catholic school. I had a senior year theology teacher, Father John Krivak, deeply philosophical, not a Jesuit, but kind of acted like the best of what you'd expect out of Jesuits, and none of the worst.
Yeah.
A Jesuit and no communism.
Yeah.
And
love it.
And
love it.
And I remember this like to this day. We had an exercise in the class, and it was prove the existence of God. Write a paper to prove the existence of God. And my argument was basically threefold, if I can remember this correctly. One was the natural log. Like, the natural log's weird. Why should there be a thing that like predicts so many different things, like bacteria growth and trees and like all these different things in different categories, and I actually kind of essentially referenced this in that clip with Brett and Heather about sort of fractals. It's like the math, the underlying, if math isn't the language of the creator, then what the heck is it?
Yeah.
Because it's really weird that it works in all these domains. Especially in a world where we have quantum mechanics that's so crazy. So shouldn't math break, but we use math to discover crazy magical world? Like, all of that's crazy. And you just don't think about it. But if you think about it, I think it points in directions that aren't expected. So that was one. Number two was less strong, which was entropy. So, the law of entropy. Well, the law of entropy is basically like the nature of things is to decay into chaos. And yet that's not what we experience in our world. We are actually experiencing increasing order and complexity, not degradation. And there's a lot of degradation in chaos, actually, but you know what I mean, and more broadly speaking. And a physicist could punch holes in that. Oh, that's because we've got an external energy source or blah, blah, blah. But that was number two. And then number three was empathy. That's weird. And sure, you can have some evolutionary groupish psychology. Oh, we evolved in groups, mirror neurons, blah, blah, blah. But at the time, as a high school student, I was like, well, it's really weird that we can not only have an experience ourselves, but be able to put ourselves in another man's shoes. That's really strange. What is the point of that?
Yeah. You were a deep thinker at a young age, man.
Well, so I was like a little young Republican, going to, I like to debate. My Uncle Bill was a lawyer and a Democrat, so we'd always get into these great arguments. They were loving, but they were always a little tense and fun.
That's great.
And so I had this moment because I had Father Krivak, who he took me aside and he was like, this is like a college level paper. This is really great. Oh my gosh. He rescued my faith in a certain sense, because he proved in that class that I could be a philosophically oriented, questioning, skeptical person, and that there was plenty of room for me in Catholicism. That my favorite priest would revel in philosophy. And most Catholic school experiences don't actually open that door to the richness of the philosophical tradition.
Right.
I'm sort of rediscovering it now, and I'm 47.
Yeah.
So even with that, you know, you go to college, you come out, I'm working in New York City in television, at MTV and Nickelodeon. I met me and my wife, and my faith is sort of like I'm barely going to church. I'm like much more like your typical, not paying much attention to it, cradle Catholic.
Yeah.
We do pre-Cana. We do get married in the church. So that was great.
Yep.
And then my son is baptized by Father Krivak.
Yeah.
And I first put him in Catholic school. We're in Jersey. I put him in Catholic school for kindergarten. And I've told this in other parts because education's a big thing for me.
Yeah. Well, I'm a teacher, just so you know. So yeah, me too.
It's well, and you might not like everything.
No, I'm a pretty iconoclastic fellow. So please continue.
Well, so you know, he's in kindergarten at Our Lady of the Lake in Verona, New Jersey, and it's hard. And they're giving homework. And I'm like, and I go to Sister Mary Agnes, the principal, and I'm like, Sister, what the heck is going on here? Like, this is supposed to be picking your nose and finger paint and getting socialized. Am I misremembering kindergarten? And she says, no, you're not. That is what it was. And I'm like, well, that was better. This stinks.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't disagree with you, but we are compelled by the parents and the community to keep up with the public schools, which are becoming rigorous.
That's right. That's right. I hate
They're not
that word.
Actually rigorous. It's fake rigor.
Yeah.
But
it's busy. It's not rigorous.
It's busy work.
Yeah.
But it sucks. And so so when we moved to Austin the next year, he doesn't go to Catholic school because I'm like, I'm not sure why. I don't like that, but I can tell it's wrong.
Yeah.
It's bad for him as a boy.
Totally.
Maybe it's good for the girls. They're auditory processors. They like to, they're willing at least to sit and be lectured at.
And they're rule followers.
Boys are like losing their mind.
Yeah.
So then that starts an education journey that doesn't come back to Catholic school until actually last year, his senior year.
Mm-hmm. So
he misses his sacraments. We decide, and I'm sorry if I'm going on too long.
No. This is what I want to hear.
Yeah. And my wife is half Italian, but looks more Italian than me and raised Catholic. But much more, you know, Arthur Brooks told me, I made this documentary with Arthur Brooks called The Pursuit. And Arthur's super devout Catholic. And he said to me at one point, because he struggled with feeling his faith, actually, with the feeling part. And I asked him once while we were making it, I was like, Arthur, you make this offhanded comment about never really feeling it. Like, what's that all about? Because I kind of relate to that. I'm all in my head. I'm in my own way. He's like, well, and I said, like, but meanwhile, like my wife, she like feels the ever presence of God in her life. It's like she's tapped right into the source. She can just like close her eyes.
Yeah.
And there it is. It's like there, presence of the Holy Spirit. Yeah. And not even in like a Catholic way, just in like a spiritual way. Yeah. That's not incompatible with being Catholic, but it was also a little bit into like foo-foo nonsense from my perspective.
These broads.
and Arthur's like, well, haven't you ever heard, you know, dad gets you to church, but mom gets you to heaven? Like the women, they got all the power in this deal. They know they're tapped in. Like we're blocked off. We're cannon fodder. We're not built to be good at this. And I have experienced that myself. So anyway, we are thinking about what comes next for our son. And we decide to present him with an opportunity. Would you like to go to Italy when you graduate high school? Whether it's in school or not, it should probably be in school, but college is mostly a scam. So it doesn't need to be college. But maybe it could be college. It's got to be cheap. I'm not paying $50,000. I'm not doing that.
Oh, it drives me nuts. I know. Believe me.
That's like, why don't you just burn the money? Buy a car.
Yeah.
So every year, buy a new car. You'll do better.
Yeah.
It'll depreciate less than your degree.
Even
a Tesla.
So true. Even a Tesla.
And which depreciate horribly. So we go to Italy. And our son's like, this is awesome. I want to do this. And then that prompts some things that lead us to put him in a Catholic school for his senior year, partly to be like, look, like coherent to the Italian Ministry of Education, because he was in Acton Academy, which I love, but which is very unconventional. And the Italians would be like, "You're like a mongrel.
What is this?
I don't know what this is." You know. And then this is where my old school kicks in. I'm like, "Okay, Matteo, here's the deal. You're gonna go to Italy. You're gonna be in Rome, maybe." And he's in Rome.
Yeah.
I made a promise that you would be confirmed in our Catholic faith. You don't whether you believe it or value it is ultimately up to you. But I made a promise. That's what your baptism was.
Yeah.
And I am derelict in that.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's do this. I am kind of saying it's a requirement. You have to do it.
Yeah.
It's not really optional, but you can engage with it intellectually however you want. And so I went with him to RCIA all last year, every Sunday. I know, it's like, and we made it out.
God bless you.
It was actually good.
Good.
It was still like kind of training wheels, and but we were like the two philosophers in the room, asking all the hard questions. Like, what do you mean freedom is the freedom to ought what is good? Like, how is it free if you can only choose the good thing? That seems like that's not freedom. Got a good answer to that one, actually.
Good.
So is your son a thinker like you? Like, does your son? Yeah, that was one thing about I was always worried because I was a very bad kid. Like teenage years, I went nuts. I was a handful. And I remember when I was raising my kids, I was so afraid that when my son became a teenager, he would go off the rails like me. And what I found was, as he got older, because my dad was the typical alpha male that taught me how to be a man, but he never really took the role of priest in the home seriously. Mm-hmm. But I found that because I did, my son gobbled this stuff up, and my son, like, he wanted to learn about typology, and it was really a unique thing for me to see my son not go the smoking pot and get into trouble route, and he actually, took this stuff in. So it's amazing that your son has the capacity to do the deeper thinking.
Well, it's funny because he read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning in 7th grade.
Wow.
And then Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
Oh, wow.
And these were things he actually chose because he was going to Acton. So unlike normal school, it was actually useful, and it was self-directed. Right. And so when you choose to read a book, you like it. You like it as opposed to being forced to read it. Sometimes it's okay to be forced to read it, but So he's way more stoic than me temperamentally. Mm-hmm. Whereas I'm sort of like a natural dogmatist. Like, what's the most pure, coherent version of that? I'll adopt that one. Yeah. So the thing that was interesting about this past year, there's a couple things that lined up for him. One is he actually got things out of it, even when it wasn't clear that he was getting what I would hope for him to get out of it. Like every Sunday, it would spark these awesome conversations. Every Sunday. Yeah. Even if the class is too long and a little boring, and people will start going off about something, and you're like, why am I sitting here listening to that? It's still like the total experience was incredible. And especially, and I'm going to try not to become like the blubbery Italian I actually am, and start
I get like that too, don't worry.
But just like to have that
mentality.
Have that time with my son before he goes out of the house was just absolutely, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
Yeah.
The other thing that was really great is he started dating a girl that's a hardcore Catholic Mexican family. Because actually the school we sent him to here in Austin for the senior year was like 88% Mexican.
Yeah.
Because I also just generally think spending a lot of money on any school is a mistake. And some of the super expensive schools are like just full on possessed by the devil. So I'm going to pay you 40 grand to teach my kid.
I would just say that unironically,
Yeah, no.
This is something me and Kale talk about. My son's going to community college for his first to get his bachelor's because he's like, I'm not going to go and rack up $250,000 in debt. I'll get my bachelor's here. And we're also worried about I'm not sending my daughter to university. She'll come back hating me with pink hair. I'm like, that's not happening, But
if you're lucky, she comes back calling herself she.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, right? You'd be lucky. Yeah.
I mean, not to, it's not good. It's not good. And some of the changes we made to his schooling along the way were in response to some of that stuff creeping in. We pulled him from a school after 6th grade for that exact reason. It was like, wait, I'm paying you, and you're, what are you doing now? What are you saying to my son? Yeah. We're out.
Yeah.
But his girlfriend was also a great influence in his life and his faith, because she's like doing is it quinceañera? I'm not sure how you pronounce it.
Quinceañera, yeah.
So she's like active in the church community. And so does he believe all the truth claims? I don't know about that yet. But I don't think he's missed mass yet this since being in Rome, which beats most of the Italians.
Yeah, right.
Like, right. Him and a bunch of old ladies like with their rosaries in their hand.
Yeah. And some tourists.
Well, let me ask you this, because you had said something in that conversation with Brett that really stuck out to me. And you said you felt like a nostalgia for the mass. And because I went years without going to mass too. And it was something about going back to mass that just brought like this, oh wow, I'm home kind of feel. Like I missed Jesus while I wasn't going to mass all those years. It was like this weird thing where I remember seeing a sign on the side of the road with Jesus on, and I felt this longing, like I missed him. And it was a nostalgic feeling to come home. And I resonated with that when you said that.
So this was the thing, like I'm generally, like, you could say I'm a pretty conservative guy, although like philosophically I'm like a classical liberal. So I'm not like I'm like all over the place. I'm a little politically homeless, but this is the most conservative I am.
Yeah.
There's been times, and I don't mean to throw my wife under the bus at all, because we're actually going to mass together. We're having this whole other thing happening as a couple. That's like the supercharger that wasn't even happening before. So she's like wearing a little thing with the picture of the shroud. It's like we're both like going off into the best kind of weirdo land ever.
Love it.
But she was like, we were in a neighborhood that had like an Episcopal church at the end of the block, and she's like, why don't we just go to that? It's right at the end of the block. It's basically the same. I'm like, it's not the same.
Stop it. Yeah.
What are you saying?
What's funny is you were in New York and you were going to like the local church, and you had Holy Innocence in New York. You could have been going there. So I live on Long Island, and I'll drive to Holy Innocence to go to the Latin Mass there. Like they have a traditional Latin Mass there, and we'll drive an hour and 10 minutes on a Sunday to go to that, just because there was the same thing with my wife. My wife was Lutheran when we first got married, and then she joined RCIA. I wound up fighting with her RCIA instructors and all this, but it got to a point like my wife veils at mass now. She's embraced it. It's a beautiful thing when your wife comes around to where your thinking is.
Well, in so many ways, I'm coming around to her because the thing that's happening now and there's something I will talk about at a later date that's happened in our life that has been, I can only describe as a kind of sequence of miraculous calling type things that I can't really fully talk about now, but I'll just say like we've experienced together that are going to profoundly change our life in amazing ways. And so that's been the other piece. And it's like how do I put this? It's like Jesus was always there.
Yeah.
And I'm not like used to talking about this in this kind of way. So I kind of get a little like, I don't want to put on some holier than thou airs with the Jesus talk, but it's like, I'll give you a couple examples. I left my job at Spike TV because I made this series of rap videos. pitting
I've
John
seen
Maynard,
them. Yeah.
yeah,
I
John
saw
Maynard
them.
Keynes and Friedrich Hayek.
I remember when those came out. Yeah, I had no idea it was you, but that was amazing.
So like this was this thing that'll maybe I hope to eclipse their importance at some point, but if I never do, that's okay, and they can be on my tombstone. Made Keynes Hayek rap videos.
That's right.
But so here's something that I have recently reflected on that has brought me to tears that I won't do now, but again, I can't promise. I was invited to give a talk at a conference in Tucson, Arizona. It was like this free market econ thing. I know you made these rap videos and teachers are using them like crazy. Come give a talk. So I go and I give this talk. And while I'm there, I meet this woman who ends up helping as an investor for me to start Emergent Order, the organization that is ultimately what's behind everything I do.
Yeah.
And it's only in the past year that I've remembered fully that the guy that set up that thing, that invited me to that conference, a guy named Stephen Hassler, is a devout Catholic whose mission has been to bring free market sound economics into Catholic curriculums, which are often, unfortunately, kind of screwed up when it comes to understanding the way the material world works. Like great on spirit, hopefully. Econ gets in a little bit of communism, like a little too much communism. Yeah. And especially so, and I know it's like at this point, I just say communism because I'm approaching 50. So I just don't.
Who has time for such nuance anymore? It's crypto communism.
It is all just communism, though. Right. It's just all communism. Yeah. But so like that's crazy. Like I didn't even know that at the time. I've actually reconnected with Steve. But so here's this man who's like devout, that brought me to a place that changed my life, like my whole trajectory. I'm like only here now because I met this woman and her husband who invested in us to help us get off the ground and leave my job and move to Austin and start doing all this stuff, and still supports our work to this day. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, you see God's providence in it. Like,
it's just all there.
Your whole life changed because this guy saw something there.
I'll give you another one. So I've always tended to end up connecting with the free marketeers who are Christian or Jewish, like Russ Roberts, who I did the rap battles with, is an Orthodox Jew. He's actually running Shalem College in Israel now. So it's 2021. The pandemic nearly killed our business.
Right.
We barely survived it. And I've got this project about homelessness, and I'm working with an organization, the Independent Institute, Mary Thoreau. And we're in the middle of production on this thing. We've shot half of it. We've still got this other big shoot coming up. And my staff producer, who was one of the 5 people left, including me, my wife, and my partner, Josh. So it was like basically the 3 partners, my assistant, Jesse, who's now a producer working for me, and then this other producer. So we're halfway through, and he walks in and puts in his 2-week notice. And it's understandable. He had a great opportunity. It's 2021. Is the world still crashing, falling apart? Everything's broken. It's a disaster. So I'm like, oh my God, we're shooting in San Francisco about this thing in 2 weeks. Along the side, completely like not thinking about never would occur that this would be a solution. I get introduced to a guy by way of our local city council member, Rudy, who's like, hey, I'm thinking about having this guy rent space in my office. He's a filmmaker. I don't know about this filmmaking stuff. Could you like just meet him and make sure he's not like a jerk or not going to default or whatever? So I meet with him. His name's Sean Schiavolin, another Italian. So we're getting to know each other. And I literally have found out that I need to like put somebody on this project like ASAP.
Like right now. Yeah.
Like right now, like this week, like tomorrow. And it's like, who am I going to get that cares about this, knows what they're doing? So I'm meeting him, we're talking about it. He's done all this neat stuff with the church. He did this Humana series with the Vatican, about life. Turns out one of his projects that he's really passionate about is homelessness. And he's been working with this community first village here in Austin that was birthed out of the St. John Neumann Catholic Church, and is this amazing tiny house village that helps people with 360 support. And I'm like, wait a second. So you're a documentarian working on homelessness? If that's not,
fall
and
he's
he's
right
super
into the
Catholic.
Yeah.
So that's 2021, and like all these other things happen. We do this, so then we produce this film together a couple of years later with Troy Kotzer, the deaf actor from the movie Coda. It's on Dad Saves America. If you go to youtube.com/Dad Saves America, it's called To My Father. It premiered at Tribeca, the film festival.
Nice. Yeah.
Troy's father is this incredible character. He's amazing. His dad was really devout Catholic. There's Catholic imagery in it. It's really awesome. Of course, at Tribeca, it debuts in a block of films, one of which is about a trans cyclist who was mauled by a mountain lion. And then the guy in New York who basically went against his constituents to vote for legalizing abortion, even though so
there you are, like nestled.
And then and then this beautiful story about a father's love and devotion to faith in Christ that helps you overcome being born deaf and not being able to navigate in a world of the hearing. Like,
it's bizarre.
So all this stuff, it's all like, it's like God banging a gong in my ear, and it still took me too long to hear it.
Well, that's kind of like the nature of my question, John. It's like we seem to be in this moment. This is kind of the stuff that me and Anthony talk back and forth with offline. And we seem to sort of be in this interesting moment where guys like you, guys like us can hear and see things that, we couldn't necessarily see, 20 years ago. But it's not like you couldn't just see it, but as you sort of tell the story, it's like it's been there all along, and like it's all of a sudden sort of your eyes have sort of been opened up in a way that they weren't open before. Your ears are opened up in a way that they weren't before, and I just sort of wonder if you have seen that, and if so, like what do you account? How do you account for this new moment of people being able to see and hear?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I just,
no, put me on the spot away.
It's like, all the stuff that you've been reading, the folks that you've been talking to on your podcast, the world in which you came up as a young man and now as a man, that was not a world that was able or willing to see the kind of things that you're talking about right now. And yet we seem to be in this moment where we kind of are. It's weird. I don't know how to account for it myself.
So I think there's a couple things. I think the first is, I think it is happening. Because the first thing you got to ask is like, is this just pattern recognition?
Right.
Is this just I'm having a thing because I'm getting older? Oh, I'm finding Jesus, I'm getting older.
Yeah.
But I am encountering this, and there's obviously like the big conversations about cultural Christianity, Ali and whatnot, etc. People rediscovering that Richard Dawkins has been saying he's a cultural Christian for like 20 years, like he just said it yesterday, but it's actually in like the God delusion. It's not new.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's not
new. He's been saying that for a long time.
Oh, okay. Well, what's funny about that is because he had such a significant hand in the atheist movement that it seemed, because I did just see that recently, and I'm saying, you idiot, you created this mess and all this religious symbolism you're seeing pop up, which is basically demonic everywhere, is because you basically set the stage for everybody to not believe Christianity. What did you think? Nothing was going to take its place? But go ahead.
Well, I think it's like, I don't know. There's a lot of things happening, right? The hardest one for me to grapple with is that we are the wealthiest society this planet has ever seen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And up until the past 5 years, if you asked me, what's your posture about the nature of the world? I would describe myself unambiguously as a rational optimist. We are doing better along every single metric. We are on the path to eradicating poverty, even though most people don't know that.
That's right.
It's just because they're frankly
like the Jonathan
ignorant
Haidt theory, right?
Yeah, I mean, as a basic fact, it is true. If you gather a room of 100 random people, 80 of them will disagree because they're ignorant. But like since like 1990, this planet has seen the largest, fastest collapse in absolute poverty humanity has ever seen.
Ever.
Nobody knows this.
Yeah.
So that's weird. But okay, global poverty is one thing. So one of the things that's weird though is, okay, here we are in the United States, the wealthiest of the wealthy. And there's all this misery, like widespread, statistically significant misery, deaths of despair, 5x increases in suicidality and depression, loneliness, 7 million plus prime working age males totally disconnected from the workforce, basically staying at home, masturbating and playing Call of Duty.
Yeah.
And getting high on opiates and killing themselves.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, wait a second. How does the wealthiest society on earth square with that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so that's like problem number one.
Yeah.
Then you have the trans thing.
Yeah.
And that's really significant. And it's like, oh, this is gender politics and it's bigotry and blah, 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 blah. No, it is a really profound, frightening, and I would say absolutely demonic thing that has suddenly become viral in our society. Like literally viral as in murderously so.
Yeah.
But medically so.
Yeah.
What are you supposed to make of that? Like, so you think something you think false? This is false. Like you can be a girl or a boy. There's some intersex thing that's like a tiny percent thing.
Anomaly.
That's not really,
it's an anomaly. It's an anomaly.
It's an anomalous, and it's also a medical condition. It's not a lifestyle. It's a tragic medical condition.
Yeah.
But now like 30% of California teens say they're on the spectrum of something not heterosexual. Like that's not true. So almost all of them are straight people. They're confused.
Yeah.
And older gay people I know look at this with just as much shock and horror. I had Andrew Doyle on the show, and I was and I sort of laid it all out there in that conversation. And I was waiting for basically like, you right-wing Catholic Neanderthal bigot. Instead, I'm getting these like beautiful but also heart-wrenching emails from gays and lesbians around the world who are saying about how it's the worst time in the world to be gay because you might just be sterilized as a child and confused and put on
you think about all the tomgirls or tomboys we knew growing up. All of those girls would have been pushed into this thing. You know, like you always have gender's a thing where the right likes to say there's only two genders, but it always has been on a spectrum.
Exactly.
There's always been masculine girls and feminine boys, and you just accepted you were, you know, a little light in the shoes if you were a guy, but now they want to freaking so you never read Tom Holland's book because you said that's in your queue, but something so radical popped out to me when I was reading his book. He takes you through Christian history. So one of the crazy things is he talks about the cult of Cybele and the cult of Artemis Ephesia and how the priests of Artemis Ephesia would castrate themselves and wear women's clothing, and people will bring their children to see this. And it just struck me like what we're seeing now is like the resurgence of Artemis Ephesia coming up. And it's just because it's so unexplainable what you're talking about, right? 30% of people seem like they're mesmerized by this thing that's happening. It's just bizarre to me.
Well, so Jonathan Haidt has written, I think, persuasively about the negative things involving social media. It's especially bad for girls.
Yeah.
You have all these cross currents, right? So yes, you have the excesses of feminism. Not all feminism's bad, but there's obviously excesses. There's
I think
things
it's all
that
bad, but all right.
It's like I think there's I think that I believe fundamentally in human freedom and free will.
Yeah.
And I believe that a good society, like Christ himself, accepts, loves, and tolerates diversity. Women who want to do things that are atypical of what the average bell curve of femininity is, and vice versa. I want to live I don't want to be in Catholic Iran. I like living in a free society. And
yeah, no, I'm not.
I'm not saying you are, but you know,
I know.
I think you, Anthony. For all I know, you're like Shiite Catholic, and that's fine.
Shiite Catholic.
I'm not even saying that at all. At first,
I know
this conversation. I really just think it's because we are dealing with this cultural moment where you have a book like Tom Holland's coming out, you have Jordan Peterson starting to talk about this stuff, and exactly the things that you're saying. I think that the part of it is because the society around us is collapsing so much, and it's not that it's collapsing; it's going haywire, right? And I think there is always the urge to do what you're saying, which is reject everything and just go back. And that really is a danger. And I see a lot of people doing that where we were just goofing around before the show about people talking about geocentrism again, because people have lost so much trust in the institutions at this point that they're like, I reject it all. I just want to go into this area over here, you know?
Well, this is I think that this is one of the things that's so challenging. So I read a book and interviewed him a bunch and explored trying to make a documentary out of it called The Revolt of the Public by Martin Gurry, former CIA media analyst. Yeah. He writes this book in 2014 that, if you read it, is very prescient. It really paints the picture 2 years before Trump comes down that escalator.
Right.
Of the kind of circumstances that give rise to Trump, but not just Trump, really Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And so what he basically says is, we have been hit by a fifth wave of information akin to the printing press. Yeah. So when you think about the printing press, what it unleashes culturally is, sort of boop, 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 Martin Luther and 30 years of war in Europe. Or 100 years or whatever it was. I'm not great. I'm not the greatest historian.
Good enough.
Roughly speaking, printing press, Martin Luther, conflict, identity crisis on an epic scale.
And I would just add that, John, one of the things that you're right about Luther and the printing press, but also remember just a few short years prior to those mega events, those sort of mega things.
The new world.
Yeah, Columbus discovers the new world. So you have an absolute explosion of conceptions of time and space, in one fell swoop. You have the advent of the printing press, and then you have this turn toward the self as the locus of authority. That is just, of course things descended into, years of war and conflict, of course.
Yeah. And so the internet is as big, if not bigger, and maybe AI will even eclipse that in the way it's this insane mirror on our nature and who knows what else. But what he notes is what the internet and the tsunami of information that it has opened does, and it has benefits and costs, is it drops us into a world in which the elite is revealed to be the bunch of lying, corrupt schmucks that they've always been.
Right.
But that has been hidden from us because we basically had our information coming from,
5 networks.
Yeah.
5 networks, 3 newspapers, and Walter Cronkite saying, and that's the way it is. And there's 3 stories, and that's the way it is. It's like on planet Earth, there's only 3 stories, and you only hear about it once a week. What? So, now we live in the world where you watch our Afghan allies falling out of the wheel wells of planes in real time from their 4K broadcast devices that they're carrying in their pockets.
Right.
So how are you supposed to trust anybody when you're getting lied to from every single angle? You have the tape, you prove it, you know that you're a liar. You know, when JFK came out to the press corps and said he had nothing to do with the Bay of Pigs invasion.
We're like, okay, well, I guess so then.
Well, everyone in the room knew he was lying, and that it was like an operation that's been in the works and started under Eisenhower, and it was a U.S. deal. But they are like, well, we've got to support the president. This is the Cold War. They basically print what the president said uncritically, and his approval ratings go up 10 points the next week. So that now we don't have that. And some of that's great because I don't really feel like living a lie.
Yeah.
But then who's got the truth?
Right. And what do we share? I mean, I think this is the thing that's so frustrating. And for me, you know, I don't know about you, Anthony, but this is sort of one of the reasons why I care about this thing called the meaning crisis, because it seems to me that the meaning crisis for us does not come from a dearth of information. It comes from a fire hose of siftable, unverifiable data. You know, just we're getting flooded with it. And like, how do you sort? Because all of the old jigs that we used to make sense out of things seem to have fallen apart, you know, overnight. And that revelation, I think, is a huge part of it. You know, that you know, and to me, you know, you said there's something about the trans moment that it's like this sort of this apocalyptic moment in which you can all of a sudden see something which you have not seen before, right? It becomes the lens which you sort of retrofit all of these things that kind of lock into place. You're like, oh, these are the sort of the deeper implications of it. And these poor folks are kind of being used by what, I don't know, but they're kind of being used to jam the system or something.
Well, you have a situation where there's a bunch of things that all align. So you have generations living in a avatar world, which is the internet, right? Where you can be whatever you want to be. You can, I'm going to be a bear because I'm playing World of Warcraft and I'm a bear.
That's right.
So there's a kind of like training wheels for identity nonsense that the internet gives rise to, the kind of formal catfishification of everything.
That's right. Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Then you have the actual active efforts to undermine the biological reality coming from the likes of Judith Butler types, permeating the entire supply chain of all of education. So,
and all of it. It's important. It's important that you know, the audience understand what you're saying. It's all filtered through that crazy. Yes,
it's
Butler.
It's, you know, it cannot be overstated how essential it is as a parent that you not turn your kids over to an institution that accepts these things.
That's right.
Cannot.
That's right.
You are in dereliction of the most basic duty to protect your kids if you put them in a school that's into this stuff, which is to say no schools.
And of course the tell is pronouns, right? This is the obvious, right? And it's you know, I get some pushback from some of this from time to time. It's like, well, you know, you're just not being kind, like you're not being nice. It's like, no, it has really nothing to do with that. This is sort of the beachhead of a, you know, of a nefarious plan, you know, being seeded by, you know, just be nice and use people's pronouns. It's way more nefarious than that, you know, than just being nice.
You know, it's an interesting challenge, right? Which is everyone thinks they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Right. Hitler thought he was paving the way for utopia on Earth.
Yeah,
that's right.
There's not, you know, we have psychopathy, but that's like you're broken.
Yeah.
If you're rational and possessed by an ideology that is ultimately just Satan, you're still possessed. You're still a person possessed. So I struggle with this, but it's something I've been trying to really prey on, frankly, that I have to love the person who is the one putting forward this nonsense, even while I hate and reject and stand against the ideas and the actions, because I mean, that's what the big guy said we should do, and he walked he walked that walk. I mean, like he's
it's not just that.
He's on the cross. Like, yeah, I forgive you. It's like I forgive them too. It's like that's crazy.
It's if we want to have any hope of spreading authentic Christianity, like it comes down to loving your enemies. Like it is the hardest thing you can possibly do, but it is how it. So when you had the early church, the reason it spread like wildfire over the earth is because these people loved in a way that was just so alien to that culture they didn't recognize it. I don't know if the Catholicism we're being presented with in our modern time, like even by the hierarchy or even by our catechism classes and RCIA program, I don't know if it's strong enough to relight a culture on fire at this moment. You know, I know we all have like our apologetics of we go, you know, you go through Catholic answers, you know how to answer a Protestant, but that's not the same thing as being armed to go into the spiritual warfare that we're all facing right now.
So I was coming out of RCIA with my son, and we were having this conversation about relationships. And I'm trying to think about how much I should share here in respect to him.
Yeah,
I make that mistake all the time, sharing too much.
I'm the worst. I'm terrible at it,
and I forget. Like my family watches the show sometimes, and I get a phone call the next day. Like,
I'm surrounded by Italians. God help us. God help. Jeez.
What, you got a problem? You could just
just say it.
But what he said something that like I was so excited by. So I said, you know, whatever you think about that. So he was talking about somebody who's very strict. And I said, look, I think we live in a moment where it is better to be strict, even if you overcorrect, when it comes to relationships, than to be even close to the average. Because our culture, when it comes to the relationships, but the relationship between men and women, romantically, loving, sexually, all of it, is toxic waste. It's poison. And what you're complaining about on the strict side is, even if it's overcorrected, it's way closer to the bullseye than the average.
No,
and
it means she's wife material is what it means.
Well, it's not. And
I'm just saying, if you come across a situation, it's
the details are kind of irrelevant. But the point is, and he says to me, you know, I agree with you, Pop. And I'm like, and then I shut up. I'm like, what do you mean?
What do you mean?
What exactly are you agreeing about? I think that's one of the things that's happening is like our kids know how broken it is.
Yeah.
Because they're experiencing it.
Yeah.
I'm lucky. I've met my wife in 2001.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't an iPhone. There wasn't swiping. I still don't know which direction you're supposed to swipe. I was spared all of that. I'm like, I'm literally a graybeard. But our kids are going through like hell, and they know they're going through hell.
Yeah.
So I think the thing is that the exciting opportunity for us as men and as fathers, Dad Saves America after all, is the truth is actually pretty straightforward. And the clarity of it is like a sword that can cut through all of this BS. And the truth is, and this is really the only advice I give my son now. He's 19, he's out in Europe, whatever. I said, Mateo, I don't care what you do for work. I don't care what you study. At the end of the day, you will have a happy life if you find a woman that shares your most important values, marry her, make her your partner in everything, and have a family.
Yeah.
The most important decision we make in our lives is who we marry. Like it's more important than your career, more important than anything. The person you marry is the most significant decision you will make in your life, because once you make it, you made it. And especially, I mean, you just see the damage caused through divorce and how what people go through when you break a family apart. Like the lesson I've been teaching my kids, the one thing me and my wife got right is showing our kids how important family is. So like I tell my kids, look, the greatest proof of God's existence is the disordered lives of those who don't believe. You look around us, look around in our culture. You just look at, I mean, this is where I share too much. I have siblings who are living out of wedlock and they have kids, and you see how distraught they are in that situation. You see now, there's a lot of women in my life that I know that married the wrong guy and they're going through hell right now. And I use that not as a way to judge them, but to my daughters, like, look at how important this decision is. The man you marry, there's no greater thing you're going to do in your life than pick the right man. It's so difficult for young kids now with the stupid swiping and just running through bodies like it's.
Well, yeah, and I see it, just jump in, I see it on my front. I teach high school, and you can just see that the kids are genuinely hungry for the kind of limit that you're talking about, John. But so many of them do not feel like they have the option to not sort of play in this particular sandbox. That they feel like, well, it's just sort of, I've got to kind of have to run through, this gauntlet if I want to kind of be part of this world. And what I always want to cry out to them is like, look, you're worth so much more than this. You don't have to do it. But there aren't a lot of voices that will tell them that. There don't seem to be a lot of voices that want to be kind of bold in that. And when you do have those moments, especially as an adult, I'm a father, I take this stuff seriously like you. And it's the only important job that I have. And, and it's just like, you don't have to do that stuff. And in fact, if you do that stuff, it's like, it's not going to be good. Whatever experience you think you're going to sort of gain from it, the cost is simply not accountable in the way you can possibly appreciate at the age of 17 or 16 or 18 or 19.
Well, a piece of advice so there was a moment where my son he had two girls he liked and he was struggling with it. And I asked Russ, I said, you got older kids, like, got any advice for me to pass along to Mateo? And he said, well, one way to think about it is, who makes you want to be the best version of yourself? So I was like, that's pretty good. I'm going to take that. So I went back to him and I said, well, I asked Russ, what did he think about the situation? And of course, I have this like glorious blessing that I even can have these conversations with my son, and he's willing to have them with me. And that, and I had a very open, typical like Italian mama's boy situation, sharing too much with my mom. And so I kind of used to it. But I told him that. I said, when you're thinking about who you want to be with, who makes you better? Not who you're going to get laid with, and not stuff. Who makes you better? Because don't you want to be better? Like, why do you want to be worse? And you know what's worse, right? You do know. We know what's worse. So I had no idea if that would stick. It's a little theoretical. It's kind of an ethical thing you're trying to like impart, but it did stick. And that's kind of funny. It's weird when this stuff works. It's all in our hands.
Do you just have do you have any girls, or do you just have boys?
I just have Mateo, my one son.
So
there'll be more to talk about on that front at a future date. But for now,
with girls, it's I think dads have to really, because I mean, you see how I just see how broken young girls are now. And I think so much of it is because their dads don't have actual conversations with them. Like I sat my girls down and looked like just talked to both of them. I said, listen to me, your father loves you way too much to ever let you be that girl that just gets used and passed around. And my younger daughter started weeping just when I said that to her, you know, like just those words, hearing from her dad brought tears to her eyes, and she just started crying. She ran over and hugged me. I was like, listen to me, I understand the culture you guys are in. Like, I see the whatever podcast, I see the nonsense that's out there. Not my girls, man. Like, I will guard those girls' hearts as long as they are in my presence, and I will never, ever let them get used up like that, you know?
I mean, I think that the thing is, we have been given all the rope in the world to hang ourselves with, right? In America. And so a lot of us are hanging ourselves. That is maybe the simplest way to think about it. Yeah, there's all kinds of crazy psychopaths in universities spouting nonsense about transhumanism and communism and restructuring the society around equity things, as if we didn't try that 100 times in every continent and create in the 20th century and kill 100 million people. Like,
but this time,
that,
John, this time
it'll be different because I'll be running the show. It's always the implicit assumption.
Of course.
But that's always true. There's always lunatics. We actually have this huge amount of space to act, even in the worst case scenarios, because being poor in America still puts you in the 1% materially of the planet. And this is hard to hear. And it sounds like, look at you with your friggin' glasses and your nice camera. You shut up. You don't know my life. You're right. I don't. But anybody telling you don't have control of your life wants to control it. That is a fact. Anyone saying you don't have control over your life, they want to be the one with that. And so I think we have to accept that we have control, and we have to act where we have the ability to act. So if you're a parent to me, that starts with making choices about the environment your kids are in to the best of your ability. Like, okay, find a way to get them into a school that's got solid values.
Well, I think even the conversations the conversation you were having with your son after RCIA, right? Like, so what I do with my son, we snowboard. So we'll take 3-4 hour drives to go snowboarding together, just the two of us. And it's like, all right, time to throw a Scott Hahn tape on and, you know, and then have a conversation about it. But I really do think that one-on-one time, especially fathers and sons too, man, like, because I don't think my dad, here we go again, sharing too much. My dad loved to talk to me and tell me things, but he never really like asked me anything about, like, he'd never really ask you what you had going on or anything. It was always him telling me a story about when he was younger or this or that. He was very good at teaching me his lessons, but it was never really like, hey, you know, how's your life going kind of stuff. So I think, I mean, if anybody's listening that they do have kids, I think that's been one of the better things about my relationship with my son that I've managed to hold.
I see Brandon in the comments is like, nah, man, homeschool. I'm not going to disagree with that.
Yeah.
If you can manage to do it, I'm a big fan. My sister's homeschooling both my niece and nephew. 2 thumbs up if you can pull that off. No, I think, look, actions speak louder than words at the end of the day. So I'm just as, I'm a talker. I can be super lecturous. My old man is lecturous too. But I think what really mattered and continues to matter more than anything else is, how do you act with your wife?
Yeah.
How do you act under pressure? How do you deal with conflict? How do you manage the challenges and the adversities of life, big and small? Because they're watching.
Yeah, gotten better with that with age, but in my early years, because I had kids young, man. I had kids at like 22 years old, and
now we're talking.
Those early years were a little rough, man. Like,
but you know what? This is the other. Okay, you want to talk about macro forces breaking our society. Having kids too late is breaking it. And I think one of the reasons is we're frankly like too together. Like it turns out one way I think we can think about this is like, what is it that we generally as a human want to do? We want to avoid suffering. I mean, like, I think like one of the things that has kept me tethered to Catholicism is the crucifix, the bloody, horrible image of Christ on the cross. And it's like, what are you, macabre? What is this? You're weird. But it's like, it's a reminder of how bad it can get and that you don't really have a right to avoid suffering. But, you know, the thing is, we always want to avoid suffering. And by and large, we eradicate it to such an extent that we are living in a kind of autoimmune system society. We have autoimmune disease. It's like we are living in peanut allergy society. So, a tiny handful of people can have anaphylaxis. Let's remove all the peanuts from every school, and no one gets peanut butter anymore, even though it's so much better than all those nut butters. And next thing you know, everybody's got peanut allergies. It turns out a little bit of that peanut suffering goes a real long way. In fact, if you have peanut allergies, being re-exposed to peanut dust is one of the ways you reduce it. Suffering has benefits, and we have thrown those benefit babies out with the bathwater. And like, we aren't going to go back. I hope we don't go back to the kind of poverty that induced some of these benefits along with the costs. But I think you see this really profoundly with immigrant families. So I think, you know, first generation Americans come to this country, and they, in some ways, and I know in our politics with the border crisis, this is not the most popular thing to say, they're better Americans than us.
Some of them,
I mean, they come here to this country and through, you know, extremely hard circumstances, and they're better than us along a lot of these dimensions because of that. And then, of course, they have kids, and the kids suck too. And so it's like, you know,
we'll get them yet. We'll get them yet.
How do you think we can avoid being cynical about everything? Because, like we were saying about all the information that's just getting pushed at us from every angle. I mean, the interesting thing of even getting a chance to talk to you is, like, when you look through your Rolodex, it's like, holy, this guy's having conversations with everybody I'm listening, and all of us are listening to those guys now, right? We're all listening to Dave Smith, and we're no longer listening to the mainstream news sources. We're all listening to these alternative news, whether news or entertainment. We're all kind of plugged into that. But I remember during the pandemic, just being at a point where I'm like, I don't believe anything at all ever. Like, I don't know what happened on 9/11 anymore. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened with anything. I don't believe anything any government agency has ever told me in my life. I don't know what to do about it.
I do remember, because I was in the city for 9/11.
I was too. Yeah,
I wasn't physically in the city when the building.
You were in New York
down
at the time, right?
I was on the bus heading into the city from my girlfriend's house at the time.
Yeah, my wife was going to SVA, the School of Visual Arts in Gramercy Park at the time.
Oh yeah.
So it was a similar situation. I wasn't in the city, but
I do remember at the time being like, when Building 7 came down, being like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how they got how they set up that controlled demolition so quickly. I mean, just as a, I'm saying, that's what I thought at the time. And like, I was like a totally just plain old normal person. Now I'm a psychotic, but that's
right.
I think we all are. That's the point, right? I think we've all just been gaslit to the point where it's like, I don't know what to trust from anywhere anymore. I think that, like, that fog of war feeling, I'm just tired of it.
Absolutely.
This is a very difficult problem. I don't have a good answer. I'm not sure if there is an answer. I would say a couple things are probably useful. You know, it's easy to say, read from a lot of different perspectives. That's really expensive in terms of time and bandwidth. Walking down the street and talking to your neighbors is a pretty powerful corrective, even if they've all got stupid groupthink nonsense beliefs about a bunch of things. There's still humans, and like that experience has a bunch of information in it that we don't really get with this. So that's useful. I think it comes back to what started this conversation and why I think you reached out. I think that our faith is a core source of truth.
Yeah. I would add on to what you're saying there. For me, one of the ways in which I have been grounded, I think, to try to do a good job of seeing what is real and what is not real in front of our eyes in terms of what's going on, is to have something to compare it against. Part of that for me, of course, is my faith. But another big part of that for me is just I've read a ton of old books. Like, that's what I do for a living. I teach old books. And so, that affords a kind of perspective, that if you're really just caught up to date and all about the current thing, you simply don't have anything to compare it against. And so if you can kind of have this bank of these things that you can compare it to, these sort of patterns, you can start to see, oh, I know what this pattern is. This reminds me of this and this and this and this, and without that, I'm not sure. And again, I'm sort of speaking personally here, but without that kind of bank that I have and I bring around with me on a day-to-day basis, I'm not sure how I would make sense out of all of the sort of the craziness that we see going on around us.
It is even so. This is like the biggest, hardest question still, because it is really hard. How do you know? Okay, so it's like, what have we experienced, right? Just recently. The entire handling of the pandemic, which should have been the ultimate example of these government agencies putting the public first.
Yeah.
I'm very libertarian minded. I would eliminate virtually all of it.
Yep.
But, like airborne infectious disease, that's like one of the things we're like, oh, maybe we should keep that because people can travel. And then it turns out like, oh no, you're not just crazy liars. You're such transparent liars that you're just going to gaslight us on the most obvious stuff possible.
Yeah.
Right from the start, and cover
really insulting.
And
really
so
insulting.
Like, I think that justifiably broke a lot of people's brains.
But, I want to say, John, not enough people's brains have been broken by it. Right. I mean, it's like to me, it was so clear and transparent as you talk about it. And yet I still I still find myself to be a freak in a world that refuses to push back against what was jammed down our throats. I'm still signing forms for exemptions for me and my family. It's like, what? Like, it's 2024, for God's sakes. Like, what the heck's going on?
Well, it's
and nobody is paid for that, right, John? I mean,
no.
Nobody's there's been no accountability for the debacle that we all lived through.
Well, again, I think that these are the things that are the reason why I have come back to revisit my lucky birth into Catholicism.
Yeah.
This is like there's all this stuff, but then it's like, well, okay, in a world that seems to be like consciously trying to kill truth at every single, like that there's no such thing as truth or meta narrative except our meta narrative. The fact that you got a 2,000-year intellectual tradition to tap into.
Totally.
Man, is that useful? Man, is that a mooring line?
Yeah.
And that is exciting. And I think like you can make that an adventure. I'm trying to. Like, I'm excited. I'm like, it's like, did I even read Thomas Aquinas? I probably did. I'm gonna have to reread Thomas Aquinas. I'm so excited to reread Thomas Aquinas.
The wild thing about being Catholic is it's shallow enough for somebody who can't read and they just have this simple faith, right? Yeah. It's shallow enough for that, but it's deep enough for like the most deep intellectual thinker to just go and dive into these things. It gives the most coherent way to live in the world imaginable, right? So, I mean, you even look at, I'll tell you, one of the things that really solidified it for me was the church's stance on birth control. It was like, wait, what? When you see the logic behind, well, if you start using it, then you start using the person you're with for just pleasure, and then that like you really can trace even the trans stuff, all the issues we're dealing with, same-sex, all of that comes down to birth control when you really think about it. Because once you take sex and use it for anything, obviously there's two purposes to sex, just reproduction, but once you separate reproduction from it, it just becomes kind of a free-for-all, and society kind of loses its mind and just makes that its main goal.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this in the conversation with Brett and Heather about the sort of like paradigm shift that birth control represents, right? Like biological history wise, it's like you take a bunch of things that are so deeply encoded into the nature of male and female that they even express themselves in plants.
Yeah.
And you now have the wheel, like the regulator has been pulled off. There's no brakes on the car anymore.
Yeah.
And to just sort of do that without any kind of sense that, hey, I wonder if this might change things. Yeah, it might, just a little bit. It might just change just a little bit.
I think this is the interesting challenge when if you it's freedom and responsibility, right? Mm-hmm. So there is a kind of inescapability of the kind of changes that have happened, that this was going to happen. So we're still grappling with it. Why do we think that the time scale we're living in is the right resolution to think about this in?
Yeah.
The full processing and renormalizing of human existence in the aftermath of the pill and birth control might be a 300-year exercise.
Yeah. If we make it that long.
But right? I mean, that might be what it's going to take for norms and things to shake out, and all the ways that like the pill wrecks women's bodies, and
that alone, just what it does to their bodies alone. Forget even the philosophical implications of it. Like it really, it's made women find the wrong man because they don't see men the same way they do when they're off the pill. Then they get off the pill and they're not attracted to the man anymore. Like all these weird physiological things happen to women when you're on it and stuff. You're right. It's going to be hundreds of years before we figure out what that is. What I found interesting in your conversation with Brett because when he talks about evolution and he talks about this great gift that man has, and I'm like, wait, gift from who, Brett? He says this thing like he just takes this over granted. He's like, the great gift that humans have is that we're able to do this, and that. I'm like, but wait, what do you mean gift from who? Because evolution's another one of those things where I feel like we give so much leeway to what the scientists tell you happens in evolution, right? It's like because we're Catholic, right? So faith and reason have to work together. But when it comes to evolution, it seems like anytime I watch a nature documentary, you'll sit there, you put it on, and it's like, well, the Earth was like this 5 billion years ago. It was all this lava, and then life comes. It's like, wait a minute, that's a very big leap you made there. I don't know. And then these species are transforming and stuff. So I kind of see evolution not in scientific terms. I see it in a narrative form where I feel like they're so adamant about the way they tell the story of evolution as a way to get us to just debunk the Christian origin story. So you almost look at the Christian origin story as, that's just silly nonsense, Adam and Eve in the garden. And you think it's just a fairy tale, and you don't actually realize, like, maybe God gave us that story for a reason, and we're supposed to actually think about that story.
In the early, when I was living in Verona, New Jersey, and taking the bus into Spike TV every day, I had 4 hours on average of daily commuting. So I got that. I filled that with all kinds of stuff, teaching myself economics, maybe poorly, maybe not. And one of the things I did is I went through this rabbit hole. We're on, like, for one stretch, I watched this like 20-hour symposium of all the new atheists called Beyond Belief. And then I listened to like 5 intelligent design audiobooks. It's like, oh.
Yeah.
And, there's all these arguments that get made, irreducible complexity, and these different arguments that are part, the fine-tuning of the universe for life, that like there's only, there's like all these different variables that all must be in exactly the right set. There's all these like philosophical ways of trying to understand why we're here. Will there always be God of the gaps at the bottom of that? That might be the case, right? Because what's so weird is first of all, the Big Bang's really, really strange.
Yeah.
It's strange that like well after the fact, you have the actual best explanation that doesn't involve like kooky nonsense math. It all just exploded from a single point and has been expanding ever since. Like,
yeah,
what came before that and where did it come from? It's membranes that are smashing against each other in a bubbling cosmic quantum soup. It's like, okay, I guess you could just say it's super turtles all the way down. There's all these little like turns of phrase, but why is there as Jordan Peterson say, like a superordinate being, meta being? Why is that any crazier than quantum physics? Exactly. Why is the notion that there's actually a consciousness that we don't understand how consciousness works? We don't know what it is even. So that's also crazy weird. We don't know how to reproduce the origin of life. Right. Oh, it was lightning bolts in a primordial soup. It's like, oh, we've had enough technology for long enough that we should have been able to get like a couple proteins to turn into a thing.
Why can't we recreate this scenario?
Yeah, like a starter sourdough or something.
There's a leap of faith there. I don't know where to think about it. Is the Adam and Eve story a moral framing device for a moment at which the soul entered the creature of human? Did we come down? Like, I don't know the answer to any of that. I really don't. I don't think
you can. I think what's interesting. Did you see Graham Hancock's thing, Ancient Apocalypse? Did you watch any of that? He's got this theory that there was this civilization that existed before anything we can account for today. Like, even when you're talking about the pyramids, like, we don't know who built the pyramids, but it just seems like anytime you touch on that story, like, he gets labeled a racist because he's trying to say, no, there was a civilization before that. And then there's this big flood. It's like, there's this big flood. What, you mean the biblical flood? No, not the biblical flood. It's a different flood. It just seems like we take a lot on faith in the secular world that I don't want to make this a conversation on evolution. I just think it's interesting how even that narrative has broken on me over the past since COVID. It's like everything just seems to be, I don't know, man. I just feel like you get back to just, maybe you just need to just have faith in God and not even pay attention to half the stuff that you're seeing and just.
My grandfather, name is Gino Gaetano Popola, and he was a doctor in Philadelphia. He was also the president of a pro-life Catholic Doctors League. He sort of he kind of planted the seed in our family to be really engaged in our faith. So in some ways, I feel called back to my Catholicism in honor of him and my grandmother, but especially my grandfather. And I asked him once, I shot this interview with him when he was still young enough to do it for hours and 5 hours of just like asking questions. And I asked him, Grandpa, how do you have such a strong belief in the church and in your faith? And I don't remember all of the answer, but the part of it that really stuck out was, he says, I've just seen so many miracles. There are so many unexplainable, incredible miracles. and I've started, catching up on things that a lot of people have already been on board with, like the Exorcist Files podcast. I'm turning into a Jesus freak one day at a time.
How about the shroud? You said your wife wears a pendant of the shroud. Did you ever look into the Shroud of Turin?
Oh, yeah. I watched his Father Spitzer.
Yeah, so good. So good.
And then I saw it exploded a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, they found new evidence on it, right?
Yeah, so now it turns out like that, because of the cellulose decay, it's 2,000 years old. Isn't that convenient?
Interesting.
So, there's a danger in rooting your faith in things like that. But man, there's a lot of things like that. How can you explain something I didn't learn about until this past year, that I guess there's been 5 instances of the Eucharist turning into heart tissue?
Yeah, Eucharistic miracles. So I really think even the shroud, right? In this age of doubt, when you have all this technology coming, because technology is basically magic, right? Like you're in Texas, Kale's in Connecticut. We're having this conversation. We never met each other before. We magically came together. But in this time of magic, it's like God left this little thing for those who do need a little bit of that doubting Thomas moment where I kind of need to touch the wound, and anybody that actually goes into it with an open mind, you'll get the skeptic who will tell you, nope, that carbon dating testing, blah, 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 blah. But if you really think about it, it's like the person who created this thing in the Middle Ages had to have the foresight of photography to it's just bizarre to even consider that a possibility. So
so look, it ends up being, I do think that Jordan Peterson's played an important role for me in that, being a cerebral guy, what is the one thing he does? If you're going to say there's one thing, I would say it's multidisciplinary pattern recognition.
Yes,
so he takes this thing with, it's sort of like you go to the eye doctor and you get, it looks like, we shop at the same glasses store. One of the comments.
Somebody pointed that out. Somebody's saying the same glasses.
Got to be a little hipster. You can't be too trad cat. You got to have a little bit of.
I get plenty of heat for it. So that's all right.
But he like, you're at the glasses store and they fly all these lenses in front to bring things into focus. Right?
This or this. Yeah.
And I think that was really powerful for me to say, and I think it is interesting. Now, it's dangerous because you have confirmation bias lurking at every turn. Oh, this looks like that, therefore this is that, and this is the same. But it is interesting and powerful that you can ask the question of anything, right? How do we know what truth is? Like this postmodern question, is there such a thing? Asking that question is reasonable. The best we've got, like, how do you even know cause and effect works?
Yeah.
How do you know when one thing causes the other? It's actually a very deep, fundamental question that's not easy.
Yeah.
So, but the best we ever get with cause and effect, even in the physical material world, is how many instances, how many angles can I come at this problem that cohere and point in the same direction? And I just feel like the more lenses you put on reality, the more the truth of God and of Christ, that he was a man, that his teaching was radical, and radical in ways that are crazy.
It's awesome to hear Jordan. So me and Kale really do. A lot of people are like, oh, Jordan's a Gnostic. He's not. But I always appreciated the way he answered, even early on when he was being a little coy about it, when they would say, are you a Christian, or do you believe in God? What do you mean by belief? Because it kind of shatters the shallow Protestant faith alone thing, where it's just a very service. Well, if you accept Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior, you're saved. He really he kind of shattered that narrative and said, no, belief is like, you do the thing, right? You have to act it out. You can't just say you believe it. You have to actually act it out. He always took the Bible stories seriously. He never treated them as like they were just some stories. He treated them like they were very serious material. And then I think once he started talking with Jonathan Peugeot, I think he really, really started taking it. I love conversations between those two guys more than anybody. Like just hearing him and Peugeot bounce off each other. Those are some of my favorite conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, you know, one of the, you know, a guy that I have a lot of respect for, and I've been on his podcast a number of times, is Paul Vanderklay. And his sort of riff on Peterson, I think, has always been very helpful for me to understand. He always calls him, you know, Jordan Peterson is the unauthorized exorcist of Mark 9. And what Peterson has been able to do, you know, we talked earlier about being able to see things anew that you thought you had seen all along, but you didn't see sort of in a real way. And so Jordan Peterson sort of basically takes, you know, cuts. Again, I'm thinking of modernism here in sort of like biblical theological terms. You know, basically says that, you know, you modernists have not taken the story itself seriously at all. Let's take a look at these stories again, and all of a sudden they come alive in a way. And so he's really cast away some of these. You talk about these frames or these lenses that have been limiting in our ability to see the truth. And so I will always be incredibly thankful for Peterson's ability to open these things up for a bunch of people. And I see people in the comments are saying this too. And you can have your frustrations with Peterson. That's fine. You know, he's not the savior or anything like that. But what he really has been able to do is open us up to these stories that we had thought we had kind of mapped and therefore kind of gotten rid of. You know, he says, no, you need to look, they're way better than you remember them.
I think that one of the things that frustrates people, there's a bunch of stuff that I don't even, I'm such a child in this space. So, you know, I grew up Italian Catholic and in a, you know, Catholic environment. So I didn't even realize until I was in college that that most Christians weren't Catholic, like in America.
Right.
Yeah.
I was like, what do you mean? I'm encountering these other things. I was like, oh yeah, I guess I remember reading about Martin Luther, but I didn't think that it's like totally ignorant. And I kind of think to this day, there's a I'm just realizing that, so I guess like Protestants tend to have problems with the fact that we like pray to Mary. Even that, I don't know, I'm like new to all this stuff.
Yeah.
What I think is so great about Catholicism is that the actual physicality of it, the imposition of a physical practice, the celebration of the physicality of the faith and of that is, if there was a message for our moment right now, is there one more important than that? We are entering we're entering singularity time, where maybe our solution will be we'll all dematerialize into the singularity and we'll upload our consciousness, even though we don't even know what that is, into a computer. The physical embodiment and its inextricable connection to the other pieces. Like we think like, we are in our head. It's like, no, we're not. Like we're not in our head.
Right. It's such an impoverished sense of what it means to know. You know, as if like, because under that sort of framework, my computer knows something and my computer doesn't know anything. Like not in the way that we understand knowing, but, you know, so that full sense of epistemology is, as you say, John, it's physical. Like we know physically, and, you know, we need to, you know, so many people I think pretend otherwise. You know, it's like, you know, flash drive insert here, you know, flash drive take out.
Well, I mean, even like the notion and the language of like, you know, to know someone biblically is to
no, exactly. No, and I use
with them.
I use this example in class. Yeah, I use this in class all the time, you know, because we're all sort of Cartesian in our sense of like, you know, to know is sort of merely this sort of abstract thing. It's like, no, actually, you know, we know, you know, it's like when you hug your mom, right? If you're fortunate enough to have your mom still alive, it's like when you hug your mom, you know, at a level that you can't even fully process in your head at all. It's like there's that familiar hug, or when your mom grabs your hand. It's like, that's knowing, in a profound way that we just overlook. We just pretend is not real.
I think
the sacramentality of our faith is so. It's like you need to be in the presence of the priest to receive absolution, because there's so many people that are doing the online Christian thing. Like they think they're like that. I know a bunch of Orthodox kids who've never been to divine liturgy, and they're like, "I'm Orthodox." I'm like, "No, you're not. you've never even been to a church. What are you talking about?"
I mean, one of the things early conversation I had was with Malcolm Collins.
Oh yeah,
interesting.
Like
guy.
Malcolm and Simone.
Yeah, Malcolm and Simone.
Yeah, they're great. I watch their stuff.
And I can't remember how we got connected.
Well,
I've been to this dialogue conference, which is like Illuminati adjacent. I think is the best way to put it.
That's so like, good.
I'm still waiting to find this the lizard men. I'm still I haven't found them yet. Unless I've become them.
Keep looking, brother. Keep looking.
But he said something that I was struck by, and he says it offhandedly. He said that the Catholic reconciliation delivers like 90% of the benefits of psychotherapy.
Yeah,
and he said it like offhandedly, and I'm like, huh? And I've just sort of started to hear other instances of that. No, this has actually been studied.
Yeah,
this is a new religion, right? Yes, there's a thing that people have accepted for 1,000 years. But we need to do a double-blind academic.
Right. Studies suggest, like, really,
so that we can say that it was studied. Like Harvard's doing some $250 million human flourishing study.
Right.
I have a feeling that we could all write the results.
I'm pretty sure.
Save the 250 million.
Like, or just give me one of those 250. We'll call it a day. I'll give you the results you need. I'll even format it in Word for you, please.
Yeah, faith, family, community, and work. It's like one speech by Arthur Brooks, and you got
that really is the formula right there, right?
Yeah.
This is maybe this is also, there is this weird thing, right? Why are we even here? What's the point? Why create? If God created us and gave us free will, why? If it's not to experience the process of life and of doubt and of exploration and of asking these questions over and over again forever, because that's clearly what we've been doing and will always do. We'll be having the same conversation. If we're still on this planet as a species 2,000 years from now, we will be having the exact same conversation. Like, we know that for a fact. So that's really weird. Like, why create like this, like the ultimate rerun?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I've seen this show before. I love this episode. Let's watch it again. Avoiding Babylon. Yeah, good luck.
That's right.
It's interesting why if you watch the episode I originally sent you, I explain why I chose that name and stuff, but it's pretty interesting. But speaking of confession, I just watched that Menendez brothers thing on Netflix, and I'm like, first of all, I had to turn it off on episode 3, but I looked at my wife, I go, if that Eric Menendez would have just went to a priest instead of his therapist, he would have never got caught. They would have got away with it.
That's crazy.
Well, I'll tell you, if there was ever a you want to talk about like what should our kids be getting into as careers, there is going to be a desperate need for non-psychopathic therapists.
Yeah.
Because the mental health problems aren't going away, but finding a therapist that's not going to make them worse, that's getting hard.
Listen, I interviewed I interviewed my this girl, Nancy Charles. So she grew up, she had same-sex attraction, and she told her conversion story on the show. And she was very much a tomboy, and she went to a therapist, and the therapist talks her into transitioning.
Yeah.
Like it's like the girl wasn't even considering it. It wasn't even like a thought in her mind. She was just dealing with depression, and the therapist talks her into transitioning. So she's like really considering starting these drugs, and she walks into a Catholic church and has this unbelievable experience of the Eucharist. She didn't even like know why she was going in the church. She just went in and now she's had this unbelievable conversion. And a lot of it had to do with Jordan Peterson too. Like these conversations, don't think these conversations we're having are meaningless. Like you never know who's going to stumble upon this conversation, listen to it, and something you or I said strikes their heart.
Yeah. And I'll say that's why I will, YouTube lives forever, right? We know this. I know, for better, for worse, John, amen. But like, I know, look at your video, a video you posted 2 years ago, John, right? Probably its initial run, it had X amount of views, but consistently over time, those just grow and grow and grow and grow. And so for me, Peterson I will always stand up for him because of that moment, right? I mean, you're talking about Nancy, Anthony, and it's like, it opened something up in her, which prepped the soil, so to speak, for some seed to take place, to sprout and to root, to root and to sprout. Like that's a real thing. So, it is a kind of like almost like a what do they call, like a pre-gospel or something,
Yeah,
that's a good way to explain it.
It is. It's good training wheels. This brings me back to that question that I was kind of surprised when so coming back to the conversation that sort of introduced us that I had with Brett and Heather.
Mm-hmm.
And I go off on my little tirade about why I'm coming back to Catholicism in a bigger way, without mentioning the actual most important stuff, which is like belief in Christ. But
Jesus.
Sort of like in context.
No, but wait, I don't mean to cut you off, but I have to stop you there because I think I think it was good that you did that. Listen, you have to realize most people's experience of Christianity is, have you accepted Jesus? Have you accepted Jesus? So I think you speaking on it on a deeper level like that was the way to handle it. Like when I evangelize, I very rarely mention Jesus initially. I always try to talk about look at the chaos in the culture, something like that. Look at the trans movement. I've brought people back to mass just from the witness of that. So I really do appreciate how you handled that. And the question you asked them at the end, can you give me a reasonable response for why the human soul, without the human soul, why are people created equal? Like you phrase it yourself better, because I forgot exactly how you worded it, but you left both of them kind of stumped on how to answer that.
Well, this was the thing that I was really surprised by. And because so you said it well. I don't understand how you can justify human equality.
That's right.
Any other way. Like there's arguments for it. You can there's a couple arguments, right? The most the closest to a functional one that's secular is essentially an economist style utilitarian argument that also kind of rhymes with it doesn't really rhyme with evolutionary psychology, because that's like we're groupish and stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah.
So that's already kind of a problem. But the basic utilitarian argument is something like the golden rule works.
Yeah.
So because the golden rule works, because there's a kind of logic to treating each other as if we would like to be treated, and that gives rise to equality under the law, and then the stability that comes with essentially the classical liberal institutions of the U.S. Constitution. The best articulation of this is the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah.
And that Lockean utilitarian thing, that's all there is. And the thing that really drove this home for me was a prior episode. I was a judge at this debate, this Incubate Debate High School Debate League. We're working on a film about this, actually, about what's happening in high school debate, which, Kale, you'll understand. What's happening in high school debate is real horrible. It's real bad. It's total takeover by the mind virus.
Yep.
But I met Peter Boghossian there, and so we shot an interview with Peter, and it's on the channel. And we come to this point in our exchange that I suddenly realized for myself, oh, that's the woke philosophy. Like, okay, I get it. And what it was if you are an alien that comes down to the earth and observes the human animal with no moral valence, you're just an observer, a materialist, robotic, synthetic observer. What do you see? You don't see equality. You see might makes right.
Yep.
You see tribalism.
Right.
You see tribalism along relatively skin deep lines about race and creed and genetic lines. And that's what you see. You see, oh, that's reality. That's actually reality.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be a materialist, that's what we are.
Yeah.
We are a might makes right tribal being. And if you're going to root your morality in reality, why wouldn't it be wokeism? Why wouldn't it be that the entire premise is to put yourself in the service of the strength and domination of your tribe? That's like all human history.
Yeah.
Let's keep going with that.
Yeah. And Brett, again, I'm not surprised. I've watched enough Brett and Heather to know that they don't have an answer for this. They just sort of make this moral leap. And again, good people. I genuinely learn a ton from them. This is in no way, I'm not trying to throw them on the bus.
I enjoy Brett a lot.
So when we talk about it, but the Imago Dei is a miracle, period. End of story. And Peterson.
What is that phrase? What is Imago Dei?
Yeah, the Imago Dei. We're made in the image and likeness of God, right? And so Peterson makes this point. It's a Catholic, Christian point, which is, the Bible radically asserts that we are made in the image and likeness of God, right? This is, as Peterson himself says, and you said it the same thing. It's like this is in no way evident in a natural sort of observation of the world, and our entire society and culture and legal system, everything is predicated on this notion of the Imago Dei. Please, Brett and Heather, please show me where evolution shows us this, right? In other words, you can't. And again, I'm not trying to trash anybody on this, but we have to sort of it's revelation, right? It's a revelation that this notion of equality, that we are made in the image and likeness of God, it just is, and societies thrive have a genuine thriving in relationship to that revealed truth or not.
Well, and so that's the thing that's so interesting and so potent, right? So you have this, you talk about what's the proof of anything.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that when you structure your political institutions around this fundamentally crazy Christian assertion.
Yeah. Because it's wild. It's wild.
That's wild and not true with your eyes. Right. That all men are equal in the eyes of God. That we all have a humanness that isn't just some platonic sort of tautology. Like we are the essence of the human is the humanness essence. It's like that's a tautology. That's just saying the same word twice.
Right.
When you do it, wow! Look at this human hockey stick starting in like 1850, and suddenly.
Have to listen. You really have to read Tom Holland's book, because what you see when he takes you into Roman and Persian, so he takes you into Persia and ancient Rome, and what you see is before Christ comes, you see a civilization that is nothing like our modern civilization. People take it so for granted, the world they live in, right? What you have is Caesar marching in with bragging about murdering 1 million Gauls, right? And he's proudly proclaiming this. You have to realize what we even think of, Mustache Man. It's like he's evil, right? We have that preconceived notion. What you have is this idea of a woman who has the same name for her mouth, vagina, and her anus, which is a urinal, because men viewed women as just a place to dump their fluids in. That's what pre-Christian civilization views the world, right? So if you have a child who's born with a defect, you throw them to the side of the road. People don't realize this idea of even Black Lives Matter. You see somebody who's downtrodden and you hold them up as the victim, and the victim is the one you have to protect and you have to go to bat for. That is such a Christian idea. And I think even when I was watching your conversation with Brett was trying to make sense of religion from an evolutionary standpoint. And it's like, sorry, there's no way we would choose to pick a religion. Like, there's no way nature would produce a religion that goes against every instinct you have, because every instinct you have is to be selfish and do what's good for me. But the only thing that actually makes you happy is when you die to yourself and live for others. So even if you look at like Buddhism, things like that, it's all about finding the self and finding the, there's nothing like Christianity out there. It's so unique amongst all religions, because the whole idea is if you want to find yourself, you lose yourself. And it's like, everything's upside down. It's such an upside down religion, but it's the only thing that makes sense.
And John, and how else are you supposed to be a father except under that exact pattern? Right. One of the things I found beautiful about your testimony about this, when you found yourself a father, all of a sudden you had this radical and profound sense of freedom, because, and you didn't say these words, but because you had sort of been given your vocation and you recognize in that moment, that gift, that all of a sudden it makes sense.
Well, the show is called Dad Saves America, partly because the film that preceded it about how our kids are in a lot of trouble psychologically and frightening, like how are we going to have a free society if we have a generation that doesn't even want it, that is afraid of freedom. And as we were brainstorming how to take these ideas and turn them into a YouTube channel and something that can be bigger than just one project, my wife was like, this has got to be about being a father. Being a dad is the most important thing in your whole life. And she was totally right, as she always is, actually. And I don't say that flippantly. I mean, she's the most intuitively intelligent person I've ever met. Like, her gut is so spot on so frequently that you ignore it at your peril. But when I've done a bunch of videos about this, as you've seen, when my son was born, you want to talk about like revelation and truth. It was the most profound ego death I could ever imagine. It was as like an ambitious guy that was a young creative director and under 30 and in New York City. Blah, blah. So the thing that's so interesting, and this is one of the things that I think our kids struggle with, I think a lot of people are struggling with, I think it's everybody's struggle, is you have to really anchor your identity carefully, because because what you anchor your identity in creates fatal cost of failure, because your identity is destroyed. So if your job is who you are, what happens when you lose your job? What happens when you get your job?
You get your job and you're like, I don't really like this job. And that happens to kids I teach all the time. Like, well, I spent all this time and now I'm a lawyer and I really hate being a lawyer. Like,
right. See, I'm really happy this isn't a problem for me, because I'm a construction worker. Like, that's my day job.
That's right.
I'm a high school dropout and a construction worker. So to me, it's like, I never had issues of like, this is my identity.
That's why you're Jesus, man. You're following his footsteps. It's like doing some carpentry.
Listen, I don't want to keep you all day. I don't know if you're on a time limit. I have time, but I don't know if you do. So
you kick me off when it's like we're running too damn long for everybody.
I'm good. So I have nothing.
All right. Well, Anthony, I'm sorry. I do have to bow out. I've told my wife and my kids that I'd pick them up at 8 o'clock here. So,
all right, Cale, you do your thing. Me and John will wrap up over here. Cale, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, John. It's been a pleasure. I hope we can connect again. I love your stuff. And just one thing, since you're a dad guy, if you've not read Cormac McCarthy's The Road, it is the ultimate book about fatherhood.
Okay, so I'm going to take that note.
It's in its pure essence. It has been known to make it has been known to make men cry. So it's amazing. So anyway,
Well,
until
that's a
next
low
time.
bar for me.
Yeah,
But
well,
I will.
Yeah,
but
that's
it's amazing.
the
All right,
sentimental Italian in us. It's Kale, I'll promote your channel as we're wrapping the show up, man. Thank you so
appreciate it.
much.
All right, God bless you guys. Take care. Bye bye.
Yeah, it's Kale and I have been consistently just trying to figure out a way to have conversations around the conversations that are going on, and it was funny because we originally were going to discuss that clip and we were like, let's just take a shot at it. So when you responded, I'm like, wow, okay, we got a conversation here.
Well, who the hell am I? I'm not. Why wouldn't I respond?
Well,
it's very
the thing
flattering for anybody to. It's such an unbelievable blessing that anybody cares at all about anything I do or any of us do, right? I mean, that's amazing.
It's an interesting time. Like, I think we both started our channel around the same. I started doing this because my job put the mandate out, and I said, I would rather lose my job and live on the street. I'll take my family, I'll move to the woods. So my first video was just me encouraging others that were facing a similar situation. And it kind of just developed into having conversations with people and stuff like that. And somehow there's 15,000 people that give a crap what I have to say. But it really is an interesting moment when you're talking about seeing all of the shows that I was listening to a decade ago. They would never have been having the conversations we're having now because something has changed in the culture a little bit.
Well, look, it's like we've got some stuff that's really fundamentally broken. We've got a lot of good things going. I believe this is the best country in the world. But there's a bunch of stuff that's broken. So it is an abomination that 1 in 4 American kids are being raised without a biological step or adoptive father. 25%. The average for the planet is like 9%.
Yeah.
So that's really way off. That we should be hanging our heads in shame as a society that is a fact. And that in and of itself, if you could push a button and solve one thing, man, that's probably the one that has the most immediate, powerful generational benefits.
Yeah. How was your dad growing up? Was your dad a spiritual head in your home, or was it because my mom basically raised us in the faith, right? So it was my dad he taught us all to be men. He taught us how to work. He taught us all how to raise a family, but he kind of left the religion stuff to my mom. And when you have that situation, you get 50% of the kids believe, 50% don't. And that's kind of how it worked out in my family. I have 8 siblings. So I have 4 brothers, 4 sisters. And it's, I think like 5 of us are going to mass and the other 4 aren't. It was, so it really is like the epitome of the statistic in my home,
Well, I mean, I love my dad. He had me about the same age you had your first kids. So I have the fortune of, pushing 47, and my dad is not yet 70. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
My dad is one of my all-time heroes. From a faith perspective, both of my parents were more or less, I'd say like, not active so much as like they made choices like putting me in Catholic school, going to mass. My grandparent, my dad's father and mother, stepmother technically, were way more ensconced in the faith. And then my Aunt Anita, my dad's sister, who's the oldest in his side, is super devout. My cousin Danny, her son, actually runs the Catholic Leadership Institute.
Oh, okay.
Which has sort of this tragic thing of helping parishes shrink and manage parishes and try to get them not to shrink.
And they always give it that weird name that sounds like a bill going through Congress. It's like making things great again, making love spread in the parishes. They shrink it down and chop half the parishes out.
But obviously the goal is really to try to help the parishes,
of course,
better, but also manage and survive if they are dealing with shrinking. I'm already sort of in some ways, I'm hoping that this new enthusiasm that me and my wife are having and exploring together can maybe even be a positive force even for my parents. because it's hard, right? I think the other thing as a Catholic in this time and for their generation, for us too, but the priest scandal.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people just got completely disgusted by this like grotesque satanic hypocrisy?
Yeah, and we have a lot of effeminate priests too, right? Like we have a lot of feminine priests. I was talking about this the other day with someone where it's like we're not giving men a big enough challenge to make them even see anything in Catholicism that they're like, wow, that like, because men do want a challenge, right? I mean, you look, guys are going to do the Tough Mudder, guys are going to the gym. They want a challenge. And I feel like we're making things so easy in modern Catholicism that men just kind of look at it and go, that's for the chicks. Let the girls do that.
Well, this is the debate that I'm only becoming aware of, that I'm ill-equipped to talk about like sort of, I know the fastest growing aspects of Catholicism in America are like the hardcore,
Orthodoxy,
traditional
too,
Latin Mass,
Latin Mass and Orthodoxy.
Yeah, Latin Mass sect, which makes sense because it's I think that's a product of our times too in a lot of ways. So Gen Z is actually, on one sense, like all whacked out to the left, but actually like Gen Z has the largest percentage of extremely conservative self-identifying, and they're all the guys. It's like it's the teenage boys that are just like, screw all this and all your feminist nonsense and all your hating on me. I hate you back.
I don't blame them.
and listen, boys, you can't hate them all. You got to find somebody to love and marry. So you better like get.
Don't you feel sometimes like you caught the last chopper out of Nam? Like
oh,
your wife?
Totally. Oh yeah. Oh no. So here's the thing. I'm Gen X. We're both Gen X, right? And no one talks about Gen X. We're like the smallest,
forgotten generation.
We're the forgotten generation. I saw there was this NPR thing that was like, we had the lowest support for Biden generationally was Gen X. Yeah. So, you're getting something right. I'm not saying Trump's the greatest guy in the world, but
Yeah, it's boomers and millennials. The Gen X just they're just the forgotten generation.
It's like, oh yeah, there was that thing with the Winona Ryder and stuff and grunge or something. I don't know. But yeah, it does seem like there's an interesting thing that's happened of a generation of priests that came up through, inspired by John Paul II.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because JP2 is just amazing.
What do you remember of his papacy? So like, were you, because you, right, all right. So all right, I'm a little young. I'm 42. So I remember John Paul II as being this larger than life figure as a kid. And him and Reagan brought down communism. You were a little older than me. So you still have nostalgia for him, or were you not really?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, my grandfather actually got knighted by Pope John Paul II.
Oh, wow.
And I have pictures of my dad and my grandfather getting Eucharist in Rome with John Paul. So he's heroic. I got a picture of him on my desk at home. I will say, if the only thing he did was stare down communism, that's a lot. Yeah. To go. So a explicitly satanic, murderous ideology that took over half the world, and you came up through Poland and fought this thing and stood up to it in the face of just absolutely diabolical evil and didn't back down and went back and at the risk of being killed and all the rest. I mean, if that's not a hero, I don't know what's a hero. That's heroism of a kind that, deserves to be admired and deserves to be modeled. And I think that that's something that, is exciting, right? It's exciting to see the kind of thing one person can do, the kind of impact one person can have on the world. Like what a unbelievable miracle.
Yeah.
So, even with the priest scandal thing is interesting, right? Because what no one talks about? That there's a lot more kids getting sexually abused in public schools than in Catholic schools.
Like way more. And it's
Nobody
mostly
talks
women.
about that.
It's mostly girls. It's such a weird phenomenon because I think these are women who are maybe hitting close to midlife. They're like in their 30s and they're on social media constantly. Maybe their husband's not paying attention to them. And then all of a sudden this 14-year-old boy is like whistling at her and they just think nothing of the future at all. Like not even a concept of the future and the repercussions of their actions. Because I don't think it's a pedo thing. Like I think it's these girls are just starved for any kind of attention that they're not getting at home, maybe.
I don't know. But I think it's important. It's an important thing to always be reminded that we're just never going to get perfection in this world. You know, the church is still fundamentally an institution filled with men and people. So, of course, it's going to be filled with a bunch of disaster and a bunch of corruption because there's no perfection in this world.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I love is, you know, you work in construction. And I love my dad actually my dad's a surgeon, but we were always fixing stuff like sometimes very serious, like knocking down walls. And I've done a lot of house construction stuff. I love the process of building things. I wanted to be a builder when I was a kid. Legos were my favorite toy. And one of the things about construction that it teaches you that no blackboard academic nonsense can ever get into your head is that you take that plan from the architect and that's all lovely, but you got to make it.
Yeah.
And the making of it always involves a bunch of not pretty solutions to problems. Like, and most people don't think about this, but like every door and window in your house has a bunch of little wedges in it to try to get it plumb and
because it wasn't
square.
Perfect. Yeah.
and that's like, you don't get perfect shapes in reality. You have to shim everything. And I think that is one of the most important things missing from our kids' lives. And I think it's one of the things that, you know, the kind of bloody nightmare of Christ's passion tells us. Look at what a messy world you're in. Like I'm going to do this so that partly to teach you that you'll be all right in this messy world. And there's more to it than this.
And I do think we have a younger generation of priests that are a little bit different than the old. I think, you know, look, those priests, a lot of them came up during the sexual revolution and the craziness of the 60s and stuff. Those guys are all starting to step down. And I think we are getting a healthier priesthood coming up in the ranks now. So, John, the last thing I want to ask you is what you always ask your guests at the end of your show. Where do you see your place in this cultural moment? Like, what do you see your role in this cultural moment right now?
Oh, you're turning the tables on me.
Yeah.
There's a couple things I feel called to try to do as best I can. So one of the things I try to do with our show with Dad Saves America is model a kind of principled curiosity. So what do I mean by that? You know, curiosity is a powerful thing, but curiosity can also kill the cat. I think there's a certain amount of constraint on your curiosity that's useful. And it's your principles, it's your values. And more those values are informed by the faith that my parents gave me that I'm now rediscovering for myself in Christ and the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, as we like to say in Mass. I think that if I can help people, if I do my job, I think maybe I can be one of the voices that can help people figure some of these difficult things out for themselves. I don't know what better I can do than that. I think I'm called to be a kind of teacher. And I think the best teachers are constantly learning and constantly trying to explore ideas and try to explain them like you learn by teaching. So
yeah,
like the teacher that is always the student. Like I know that it's highfalutin gobbledygook, but that is how I see what I'm doing.
Yeah, listen, why are we having these conversations, right? You're learning little things. I'm going to make one suggestion is that you continue doing what you are doing, where you're not ham-fistedly smacking Catholicism over people's heads, but those subtle little moments where you get the opportunity to drop it in, because I really think those are the times where it piques someone's interest to go, wait a minute, what the heck did he just say that? The idea that we are not created equal and you can't give me a justification of it outside of God creating the soul. Somebody's going to hear that and it's going to spark something in them to think a little bit deeper. So I think you're doing an awesome job. I'll also say, stay away from online Catholicism. It's messy. I'll also say, don't get involved in any of the church scandals. Don't worry about what they're saying about Pope Francis. Stay on fire for your faith, because it really is the thing that does anchor all of us. And if you, I see too often people start worrying about what's going on online and what's going on in Rome and what Pope Francis said, and it can be destructive to the soul. So
that's great advice. And I am very lucky. I am married to a woman who is, the union. We are one. And so I don't really care what people think about me. I don't care what's going out there. I go home and I am home, and that's where my identity is rooted. And so that's like a superpower. And I wish that for everyone. I really hope that everyone can find the kind of love in their life that tells them what's true and arms them to go out into the world and know that, none of it can really do, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And even the stuff that kills you, there's more to it than that, right?
Yeah. John, it's such a fun conversation, man. It's nice to just step away from like current events and to just like hearing a conversion story sometimes, even for the cradle Catholic who's been Catholic forever. When you hear somebody else like falling in love with the faith, it enlivens our hearts. So thank you so much for being so generous with your time, man. I am going to ask you to put a good word in with Tom Woods for me, because I want to talk to him next.
Oh yeah, I can connect you guys for sure. He's great.
I am dying to talk to him. Your conversation with him, if anybody hasn't watched it, is awesome. Because I want to get into the idea of because there is this undercurrent in Catholicism where people are like, no, we need a monarchy. It's like, you better settle down. Like, and when you talk to Tom, I was like, all right, I got to get him on. I want to talk to him about that. So thank you so much for your time. Everybody go subscribe to Dad Saves America. And is there anything else you want to promote?
No, that's it. We're our main place on YouTube. If you go to dadsavеsamerica.com, that is the Substack where you can subscribe and make sure you don't miss stuff that sometimes, the YouTube algorithm is a finicky thing in your feed. So if you loved all this and want to make sure you don't miss it and get your inbox mildly spammed, go to dadsavеsamerica.com.
John, thank you so much, man. It was awesome getting to meet you and talk to you. And maybe we'll do this a few months down the road again. We'll talk again.
Awesome, Anthony. Thanks for having me on. It was an honor and a privilege.
All right. We'll see you guys next time. And I think Thursday. I'll be back on Thursday. See you guys Thursday.